Hey folks, welcome. How's everybody doing today? Where's Josh? There he is. What's going on, folks? Nice to see everybody. Thanks for joining us. Always play a little smooth music to start the webinar. Always makes it a lot of fun. We're really happy that you're here. Josh and I are planning a series of these free webinars focusing on OKRs, a variety of different aspects of OKRs this fall. This is our first one. I'll tell you about the next one at the end of the presentation as well. As Josh noted in the chat, tell us where you're connecting from as well. It'd be nice to see kind of where everybody is in the world as always. So it's kind of fun to see that. If you have any questions for us as we're talking, Zoom webinar has a Q&A module. Please use the Q&A module to grab your questions. We'll monitor the chat for any questions, but we're trying to get all the questions into the Q&A box, and then we'll answer them at the end. So I'll start. I'll present for a bit. Josh will present for a bit, and then we are going to do all the Q&A together. So we're going to get everything into the Q&A chat. Okay, terrific. Let's jump into it. So this is our first of a series of free webinars about OKRs. Specifically, we're going to start with the basics. It's planning season. You're probably starting to think about 2025 if you haven't already with your organization. So we're going to talk about planning 2025 with OKRs. And to get started, we're going to talk about the basics of OKRs. We're going to get very, very specific, in fact, about why you should use OKRs. I'll talk about that very quickly. Why change your goal setting frameworks during planning season. We'll talk about what an OKR is. We'll show you what a good one or a couple good ones look like. And then most importantly, we are going to talk about how to use OKRs to make better plans at the end, right? That's the whole plan your work moving forward with the kind of organizational agility and flexibility needed to react to the world as it is today. Okay, so that's our plan for today. Let's jump right into it. The reality is this: every time we set out to do a new work item, call it a project, a product, an initiative, a campaign, a policy, anything along those lines. The reality is that you are constantly guessing. It's a fact of life. We can't predict the future, right? It's unfortunate. And so we're always trying to figure out sort of what the best thing is that we should be doing right now. And to do that, we try to make the best guesses that we can based on what we know right now, right? That's the reality. Based on everything that's happened up until this point, we are going to make the best guesses about what we want to do moving forward. Now, the interesting thing about this is that oftentimes our best guesses end up becoming a manifestation of, well, we can do it, so we should, right? And the reality is that just because you can build something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should, right? So you've got all this information, you're going to make a guess about how to move forward. You're like, okay, I've got a guess and we're going to do this. Why? Because we can, right? And that's not always the best answer or the best reason to do something, right? Our friend Jeff Bezos is up on the screen in 2014, I think it was. He made, 10 years ago, he decided to build a mobile phone, right? Because he could, right? And he had a big company, he still does, to build stuff. And it wasn't necessarily the best idea. And so we're trying to figure out not only what should we build, but is this the right thing to be working on? And is this the best way for us to deliver this idea to the people who consume it, whether they be our customers, our colleagues, third-party vendors, et cetera? And it becomes, the conversation that we're trying to have becomes a lot less about, can we build it? And more along the lines of, should we build it, right? What we're trying to get to is a situation where we, our team, our executives, the company are asking, so what? Right? We built this thing, so what? Right? Did anybody ask for it? Did anybody find it? Did anybody use it? Did they use it more than once? Did they tell their friends, et cetera, right? Did they give us money for it? Did they say nice things about us on the internet? Did they tell their, like, this is what we're looking for. So what? Did we build a thing of value? Now we find ourselves in a pretty cool time in the world. And in this time, we have the capability, regardless of what we make, whether you make a digital product, a physical product, whether you just make spreadsheets or budgets or project plans or marketing campaigns or vacation policy for an organization, we find ourselves in a point in time where we're fairly fortunate. We're fortunate because we can build continuous conversations with the people that we serve, the people that consume the stuff that we make on a regular basis. And what do I mean by continuous conversation? What I mean is that we can take small versions of our ideas, right? Prototypes, examples, sketches, lightweight versions of it, whatever it is, right? And we can get them into the hands of our users, of our customers, very, very quickly. At the same pace, we can very, very quickly learn how this small version of our idea affects those folks' behavior, right? Does it make them more successful? Does it make them less successful? Are they more confused? Are they less confused? Do they ask more questions? Do they ask fewer questions, right? Does it make them happier or angry with us, right? We can sense very, very quickly the impact of our ideas on their behavior. And we find ourselves in a situation where we now have the responsibility to decide how we're going to respond to that feedback. And so we've got this continuous feedback loop, right? This conversation that we're having with the people that we serve on a regular basis. And it's a learning loop. Whereas before, if you think about the contrast to this was sort of this very kind of linear waterfall manufacturing model of product delivery, where we built, we designed it, we developed it, we work on it in a linear fashion, and then we ship it. And then we hope that all of those things actually work for the people that we serve. And today we can actually build learning loops into all of that process to make sure that the thing that we are working on stands a better chance of success, meets a real need, and is actually working for the people that we serve. That's the situation that we find ourselves in. and we have that power. But the reality is this, and I know this because Josh and I work with a ton of teams in large companies and medium-sized companies in a variety of different industries, and overwhelmingly, most of those teams, work is fixed. And what do I mean by that? It's fixed because it's prescribed to them. Go build this thing. It's prescribed exactly how to build it. Make sure it's read, and there's a fixed date for it. Make sure you build this thing. Make sure it's read. It does these 3 things, and you get it done by Friday. Right? And there's a real obstacle there. There's a real contrast there with an organization that is shipping, sensing, and responding, that is interacting with their customers on a regular basis and then adjusting course moving forward, because inevitably there's going to be variables in our initial assumptions, right? And so as we think about moving away from fixed work towards more dynamic, more agile, more continuous improvement type of work, there's a couple of foundations that we want you to take away from this conversation as we move towards redefining our goals with OKRs. The first is this idea that everyone has a customer. Now, if you work on on the product or the service or the thing that your business sells, that's obvious. That's an obvious statement for you, right? The end consumer is your customer. But realistically, everyone inside the organization makes something and has a customer, a human being, that consumes that thing that they make, right? So maybe you make a service for the third-party vendors that service your company. Maybe you make policy for those vendors, right? That's a thing that you make that they consume. Maybe you work in a B2B situation. In a B2B situation, right, you're making products for other humans in other companies. Maybe you're building products and services for internal colleagues, right? You're building a learning management system that your colleagues in the organizations use, right? All those humans are your customer. You're trying to solve a problem for them. You're trying to make them more successful. And what you're trying to figure out is, if I make them more successful, how do I know, right? How do I know? Now, the interesting thing about having humans as customers, right, all of our humans as customers, is that humans are complex and humans are unpredictable. So as we try to figure out sort of how their behaviors should change if we've made them successful, right, the fact is people are going to do things that we don't expect. They're going to do it in ways that we don't expect. And even if we start to figure out what it is that we'd like to help them do more successfully, that's going to change over time. So we've got to keep in close contact, right? That continuous conversation with the humans, the customers that we serve. That's the first foundation. The second foundation is this concept of who does what by how much, right? And it's really based on this concept of outcomes, right? If we think about sort of that linear manufacturing waterfall model of product development, it's fixed and it's focused on output. It's focused on making a thing. Instead of making a thing, what we're trying to focus on instead these days with that continuous conversation is outcomes. Outcomes are measurable changes in human behavior that drive business results, right? So if we build something of value for the people that we serve, what will they be doing differently, right? How will we know that we've chosen the right thing to build? How will we know that we build it the right way? How do we know that they actually find value in it? We're looking for measurable changes in their behavior that tells us that we're actually driving improvement for them and improvement for us. And the way that we know that our goals encompass an outcome is they actually answer the question, who does what by how much, right? Every time we set a goal in this continuous conversation with our customers, we're going to ask who. Who are we talking about? Who is the actual customer, the human that's using it, right? We're going to say, if we're successful, what do we expect them to see? What do we expect to see them doing differently than they are today? And realistically, by how much? At what point do we know that we've changed their behavior enough to move on to something else? And that's how we know that we're dealing with outcomes, a fundamentally different way of measuring success for our work. Now, the interesting thing is that outcomes not only tell us when we've delivered value, because we see people doing things differently that are better for them and ultimately better for us, but outcomes also tell us when we're done. One of the interesting things, and again, one of the fascinating and potentially frustrating things of the world that we live in today, is that we can work to optimize our products and our services and our deliverables forever, right? How do we know we've done enough? How do we know that it's as good as it's going to get right now and it's not worth investing in any further? Outcomes help tell us that. right? Because we can see the behavior change, the growth of the behavior change or the rate of change slowing down. So outcomes help us not only determine that we've actually solved a real problem for a real customer in a meaningful way, they also help us determine when we're done working on this and we need to start moving on to something else. And so if we live in this continuous world and we're building these continuous conversations and we're trying to manage our work towards outcomes, then we need to redefine our success. We need to define it in a new way. And that's where objectives and key results come in. Now, Josh and I, as you know, wrote a whole book on OKRs called Who Does What by How Much. And in that book, we define OKRs as three things. Right? Number one, it's a goal-setting framework, and that's where we're going to focus today for the most part. Number two, it's a new way of working. We're going to start to delve into that towards the end of the presentation today. And number three, it's a cultural intervention. To make this stuff work, we have to change the culture of the company. And I don't know if we're going to get too deep into that today. We don't have a ton of time today, but we're definitely going to talk about the first two. Right? So let's start with what are OKRs? OKRs as a goal-setting framework, right? Objectives and key results. It's a goal-setting framework for teams, not for individuals, right? But for teams that defines a qualitative goal. That's the objective. And that's really the future benefit that we would like to deliver for the customer in a qualitative way, right? And it measures the success of achieving that outcome or that objective in terms of specific outcomes, right? What do we expect to happen, right? What would people be doing differently instead of did we deliver that thing or did we complete a task or did we do this activity? So what we're trying to do is define a future state that's qualitative and then talk about the behavior changes, the outcomes that we'd like to see that tell us that we've actually achieved that state. Let's break that down just a little bit further, okay? So if we talk about objectives and key results and we get into the basics, let's start with objectives, right? A good objective statement is qualitative. So you're going to hear a lot of superlatives in qualitative statements, things like the best, the easiest, the simplest, the most reliable, right? The most compelling, the most efficient, things like that. Your objective should be inspirational and aspirational. This rallies the team. This gets the team out of bed every day and coming into work. This is why we're doing the work. The objective should provide clear customer value, right? This is how the customer is going to benefit from this. Ideally, it supports the whole purpose of the organization, and we'd like to time box it. We'd like to get this done by the end of the year or by Q2 or by the next cycle, whatever it is. Now, the one thing you'll notice, hopefully there's two things actually. There's two things that are deliberately missing from this list. Now, if you're used to setting goals, if you set goals for your teams in the past, you'll notice that there's two things deliberately missing from this list. Number one, there are no metrics in your objectives. It is a qualitative statement, right? So there's no numbers, there's no metrics, there's nothing of that kind in there. The second is that there are no features or solutions or products or services or any kind of deliverable in your objective, right? We're just defining that qualitative future state that we hope to create for our customers. That's what an objective is, okay? Now, when you're writing your objective, you want to level set it. You want to set it at the right level for your sphere of influence, right? So if you're in charge of a business unit, then the overall goals of that business unit can be your objective. But if you work on just one slice of the customer journey, then your objective needs to reflect that one slice of the customer journey because that's the world that you can influence, right? So take, for example, let's say you work on authentication. Right? You work on the authentication piece of your service. Okay, your objective is going to reflect only the part of the user experience where your customers have to sign into your product because that's the world that you can influence, okay? Now, let's talk about key results, and then we'll show you some examples of what these things look like. Key results are the quantitative half of this conversation. They answer the question, how will we know we've achieved the objective, right? If the objective is this qualitative state, how will we know we've achieved the objective? So your key results are going to be metrics, to be super clear. They are metrics, they're quantifiable, Ideally, they are ratios or rates, right? 25% more of this, 50% less of that, because that gives us a better sense of how we're trending over time. Now, obviously, you need a baseline for that. And if you have that baseline, terrific. But if you don't, you can start with absolute numbers, but eventually we want to move towards ratios or rates. Your key results should be aggressive, right? We shouldn't be crushing our key results every quarter. We want to figure out something that helps us stretch a little bit. Your key results should be verifiable with evidence. So we want to make sure that we look at data, analytics, reporting, market research, customer research, et cetera, to tell us these numbers are real. And then most importantly, and the thing that makes this different and powerful and difficult inside organizations is that your key results must be outcomes. They must be measures of human behavior that drive business value. This is key, right? We want to make sure that we are working with outcomes. Who does what by how much is the key here. And again, you'll notice that in this case, we've got metrics, right? So metrics, the key results themselves are metrics. But again, no features, no solutions, no services in our goals. This is the difference. One of the key differences with OKRs is that we don't put our deliverables in as our goals. And it allows us to start to explore and to plan with the kind of flexibility that we need to adjust based on evolving market realities and the changes in the world that happen as we move into the future. To define our key results, right? If our key results answer the question, who does what by how much, we have to actually ask the question, who, right? Who is the human, the customer that we'd like to serve? So we start by defining our target audience. And that could be your current customers, prospective customers, again, users of the thing that you make. Maybe it's your colleagues, third-party vendors, leadership teams, people inside your organization, et cetera. And then once we've identified whose behavior we want to change, we ask the question, what will those people be doing differently if we achieve the objective? In other words, how will their behavior change? And again, you know you've written a good key result when it answers the question, who does what by how much? And I just want to hammer home one point, which is this. With OKRs, we don't define solutions, features, campaigns, tasks, activities, output of any kind as our goal. Instead, the measure of success becomes an outcome, those changes in human behavior. This is what makes this thing, this different, makes it very, very powerful, but also makes it difficult. Look, the last thing I'll talk about is just a quick recap of why I think OKRs, we think we should use OKRs. And Josh is going to share some examples and show you how to apply those examples as part of the planning process itself. Now, look, there's lots of benefits to using objectives and key results, especially in the way that we describe them. But the reality is this: if we don't put products and services and deliverables in our goals, then what we are doing is we are explicitly demanding that our teams go out into the world and discover and figure out which solutions are most likely to drive the behaviors that we're looking for. So the teams have the flexibility to be creative, to be innovative, to change their mind, to change course, right? Because if a thing they're working on isn't changing behavior in the right way, they can change course, right? In doing so, we're getting closer to the customer, the people who use the thing that we make. So we're building more empathy into our organization, more customer centricity, and the customer is figuring more prominently in our decision-making. And if we're doing all of those things, we're actually increasing the agility of the organization, right? And again, there's a lowercase a here on purpose. It's not a brand name agile process. We're literally making the organization more agile, more nimble, more responsive, because as the teams go out into the world to try to figure out what to make, and they learn that the choices weren't necessarily 100% accurate, they can use that evidence to change course, to correct their course. And changing course based on evidence is organizational agility. And OKRs provide us with the bandwidth to do that. So it's very powerful if we put it into practice the way that we've described it here. So I've given you a high-level overview of the basics of OKRs. I'm going to hand over to Josh. He's going to give you some concrete examples of what OKRs look like in practice, and then give you a sense of how to use them for planning.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Hey, folks. Nice to talk to you. You know, the future is going to be filled with flying cars. So let's do an OKR example and kind of imagine that you're doing something big and risky in your organization. OKRs are really great for focusing the organization on things we don't yet know how to do. Okay, that they are, there's in addition to our book, there's some good books out there on OKRs. Christina Woodkey has written a lovely book called Radical Focus. And her point of view, and one that we agree with, is that OKRs help us focus on the most important thing. And that most important thing is often a thing we don't know how to do yet. So how do we measure the success of a flying car company, right? You might do it with an OKR that looks like this. So what's our objective? Our objective, it might be to redefine local and regional air travel in North America, right? So setting out a scope and an objective to make it simpler, safer, and more accessible by the end of this decade, right? So that's a big mission. It's exciting, gets us out of bed in the morning. How do we know we're making progress? Well, OKRs need to reflect our strategy. So strategy helps us overcome the obstacles and the risks to make progress towards our goal. And one of the risks you might think in a flying car company is that we don't know if anybody wants it, right? Maybe it's just a big, expensive fire phone, right? Something that's cool technology, but nobody wants it. One way to manage this risk in the strategy might be to say, well, look, we're going to sell a waitlist spot. This is a way of managing demand. And so our key result here, the first key result, is our outcome: deposit paying customers who purchase a spot on the waitlist. We sell out that waitlist for the first 3 model years. So who does what by how much? Deposit paying customers buy a spot on the waitlist until it's sold out. Who does what by how much? Another risk of flying cars might be the kind of the safety concerns of flying cars. So we might set a key result related to safety. Who does what by how much? Our operators, right? People operating our flying cars cause no safety incidents. That's the behavior during the first year of market rollout. And so by how much? None much. The third objective is that actually people don't just buy out the wait list. People don't just say, well, I'll put $100 down or $1,000 down, but people actually use the product, right? It's not just that they buy it because it's a cool toy, but they adopt it and use it on a regular basis. And so to measure that, we've got our third key result. At least 35% of local and regional travelers, both air and land base, use our flying vehicles regularly. Who does what by how much? Who? Local and regional travelers. Does what? Use our vehicles regularly. How much? 35% of travelers. Right? So that's a fictional example, but at least I think it's fictional. But I think it kind of it makes a couple of important points about what a good OKR looks like. It reflects strategy. It expresses our goal as an objective, and it expresses that goal in ways that demonstrate the customer benefit. We're going to make it simpler, safer, and more accessible to travel by air as a customer benefit. And then we'll be able to measure our progress towards that goal through these key results, which are all expressed as outcomes. Now, as I said, this is fictional, but real organizations are doing this every day. One of the best public examples of it is from the Cleveland Clinic. They actually published their CEO's OKR scorecard on their website. The Cleveland Clinic is a healthcare organization in the US, based, not coincidentally, in Cleveland. Yeah, you'd never guess it from the name, right?
No.
The I feel like I should have said Cleveland in like a Ron Burgundy voice. So and if you look at this, right, this is a real example from a real organization, and they're demonstrating OKRs that sort of encompass the breadth of what's important to this organization, right? So care for patients, care for caregivers, care for the organization, and care for the community. And here's a kind of a drill down on one of them. The objective is the best place to receive care anywhere. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning. And the key results, right, are the absolute number of safety events and the rate of serious safety events, right? We're going to measure that as part of understanding whether we really are the best place to receive care anywhere. Here's another one, care for caregivers, right? So the people who work there are an important target of making our organization great. And so this objective is it's the best place to work in healthcare, right? And how do you measure that? Well, you measure it in terms of referrals, right? Do people recommend this as a place to work, right? And we also might measure regrettable, or the clinic is measuring what they call regrettable turnover. In other words, people who leave the organization that they didn't want to leave, right? And so, these aren't expressed in exactly the same way that the flying car example was expressed, because their job isn't to teach OKRs. Their job is to use them in day-to-day life. But I think you can see how this fits into the format, right? We're measuring customer behavior or human behavior as a way to measure whether measure our progress towards this goal. Okay. All right. So we've talked about kind of what an OKR is, and we've talked about why you might want to use them. And we've shown you some examples. The last thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about this, about how we put OKRs into use, right? So as Jeff said earlier, we think about OKRs, we think about them from sort of 3 points of view. First of all, they're a goal-setting framework. And we just talked about how you can express goals in this OKR format. But if all you do is write down your goals, I guess that's valuable by itself, but then you actually have to work towards your goal, right? And so the second part of OKRs is that it's a way of working that is driven by the goal that you've set. And so we're going to talk about that in 1 second. And then the third thing, and maybe we can get to this in the QA, is that OKRs are also kind of a culture and a cultural intervention. Okay. But let's talk about this way of working piece, because I think that's really, really interesting, and it's really where a lot of the power comes from. So once we've written our OKRs, we then sort of enter what is called the OKR cycle, which is kind of a rhythm. You can think about it at its most simple terms, as just a rhythm of meetings that we use to manage our process. So it starts by setting and reviewing our OKRs, and that happens at the organization level, it happens at the group level, it happens at the team level, right? And then we start to move into our work, right? We move into execution, we're doing it, we're learning, right? And then we're checking back in against our OKRs. And this cycle repeats itself, this execution, learning, checking in. It happens on an annual basis, right? We set our big OKRs annually. But it happens at the quarterly, on a quarterly basis as well. It happens on a monthly basis. And ideally, it happens on a weekly, or sometimes you'll hear people say a sprintly, every couple of weeks basis. But so you have these short meetings, right, for just your team every week. How are we doing against our OKR? What progress have we made this week? We meet with a larger group of people, perhaps our team and our immediate managers every month, to report on our progress, to talk about obstacles, to talk about tactics, right? And then we meet quarterly with perhaps a larger group, maybe our peer teams, to review our progress, to talk about what we've learned, and to set OKRs for the next quarter and to ratify our OKRs again. Does this still make sense? Are we still making progress against this? Do we still need this to be our number one focus, right? We do that every quarter. And then that repeats each on an annual basis as well. So we have this kind of rhythm of meetings where we're checking in continuously to make sure that we're making progress. And what this does is something really interesting. It sort of sets the expectation that we're not going to work for a year and then pop our heads back up and say, hey, did we create value? Right? Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to work in these short cycles and continuously monitor whether or not we have created value. It's a huge change, and we can talk about some of the things that come out of that during Q&A. Now, knowing that this is our basic cycle, then what does this do for our annual planning, right? And so all of these can be reflected in what we call an OKR-based roadmap. Okay, this is an OKR-based roadmap, and it has some interesting features, right? We pull directly from OKRs. We say, look, on our roadmap, we've got this annual objective, right? And then each quarter, we've got KR goals that we're trying to hit that tell us we're making progress against that objective. And then in that quarter, this is where it starts to resemble a more traditional roadmap. We talk about what's the activity that we're going to be doing this quarter? What are we going to be making? What are we going to be building? What are we going to be delivering? What initiatives are taking place, right? And so we can plan that stuff out relative to the KRs. There's another interesting feature here, right? Which is that there's a row at the bottom of this roadmap which you see labeled to learn. This is the discovery work that we need to do. The idea, and Jeff talked about this a little bit, the idea with OKRs is we're focusing on doing something difficult that we don't necessarily know how to do. And that means we need to not just make stuff, we need to answer questions, we need to learn, we need to do discovery. So every quarter, our work plan includes both delivering things, but also discovering things. And so in our OKR-based roadmap, we represent both kinds of work, right? And we represent them as the work that we need to do in order to hit our goals. Now, let me come back to our example here. So how would this look if we come back to our flying car example, right? Our annual objective is to redefine local and regional air travel, right? And so that kind of sits at the top of our roadmap. Now, how are we doing that? Well, it might be that we break out that work and we assign just one KR to a group of people. It's your job, folks, to sell out that wait list, okay? And each quarter, we might set goals for that that incrementally get us to sold out, right? We're not going to sell it out in the first quarter, but maybe we, get the infrastructure in place in the first quarter, or maybe we get the infrastructure in place and we need to actually deliver value. So we say, okay, we're going to make one pre-sale in the first quarter. That's our goal, one pre-sale, okay? But we're going to really ramp that up in the second quarter, 40% sold out. Third quarter, 75% sold out. By the end of the fourth quarter, we're going to have sold out that wait list, okay? And so we're planning not just in terms of making stuff or delivering marketing campaigns or things like that, but we're actually delivering value in each planning cycle, okay? All right. So that's we can get into the subtleties because there's a lot to talk about this in QA. And in fact, that brings us, Jeff, to our QA.
Excellent. Yeah. And folks, I've seen the questions come in. and I've noted a couple in the chat that are in there as well. So we're going to jump over to do some Q&A. I'm just going to put this screen up here for a little bit so you've got an opportunity to see it. As we're answering questions, just a note, October 8th is our next webinar. It's going to be on winning at AI with OKRs. So there's really nothing OKRs can't do, just like AI. And so when we put those two things together, it's pretty incredible what actually happens. We're going to talk about that on October 8th. There's a sign up link on the blue QR code there, as well as the bit.ly link. And don't worry, if you follow us on LinkedIn or any other channels, guaranteed you're going to hear about it. And then, of course, a link for our new book as well. So while I leave this up on screen, let us dive into the Q&A. If you can put your questions in the Q&A module, that would be the best. I do see a couple in the chat, like I said, and I'll drop to full screen here in just a minute. All right, Josh, let's looking at some of these. This one comes up all the time, and it's in a couple of different questions here. So OKRs and KPIs. This comes up all the time. I answered this on a podcast interview yesterday, Josh. How do you answer this question? And then I can see if I gave a different answer to the podcast host yesterday. But what's the relationship with the difference between OKRs and KPIs?
So you and I may have a little bit of a different point of view here, but KPI, key performance indicator, has kind of nothing to define it except that it's key, right? We've decided that it's important for our business and we're going to monitor it, okay? It doesn't really have any structural relationship to OKRs, isn't it? It doesn't really exist as an entity in the OKR system. So, I think Christina Woodkey has this lovely formulation that, OKRs are for focus, and most teams should have one OKR. But there's also the business of keeping the lights on, right? Sometimes you hear that called business as usual, right? Christina says that for that stuff, we have what she calls heartbeat metrics. So really important metrics for our team to pay attention to let us know that the health of our business, that our business is healthy, right? And so I think of KPIs that way, as these are the things that we measure to let us know that the business is healthy, and they sort of sit adjacent to OKRs, right? So we've got our focus is an OKR, but keeping the lights on, like we need to continuously monitor the health of our business, and we do that by looking at those key performance indicators.
That's pretty good. I have two more answers.
Pretty good.
just to make things more confusing. Look, here's the way I think about it. And again, I don't think this is necessarily like radically different than what Josh is saying, but I do think I do want to paint perhaps my perspective of the relationship between these two things, right? So to me, KPIs are directional. So as Josh said, they're the high-level measures of the health of the business, and they're directional. They're like, we're going west, right? Or we're going north. That's the direction that we're going. And to me, the OKRs help determine that we've gone far enough, right? So how far do we need to go before we need to start considering changing direction? That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it, which I think usually works out fairly well, particularly when you're kind of setting OKRs up and down for an entire organization, is that OKRs typically function as leading indicators of KPIs, right? So if we think of sort of the most traditional basic set of KPIs, right, high-level measures of the health of the business, sales, revenue, profit, customer satisfaction, that type of thing, your OKRs are going to be a lot more tactical than that. They're going to be very specific about what people are doing in your system right now, in your product, in your service. And those activities, those behaviors are the leading indicators of profit, sales, revenue, customer satisfaction, et cetera, right? So I think that is also another way to think about the relationship between those two things as well. So lots to consider there, but roughly speaking, KPIs at the top and then OKRs leading up to them.
That's pretty good, Jeff.
Thanks, man. All right. Let's go to the next one here. I like this one, Josh. What's an incremental way to move a team towards OKRs? The anonymous attendee who asked, I said, for the last 2 years at my company, which was founded in 1969, my manager says, our team is new, so we don't need to figure out our OKRs yet. How do we move incrementally an organization towards OKRs? You go first, and then I'll add some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so OKRs are useful for a number of reasons, right? And they can help us create alignment in the organization. They can help us create accountability in the organization. They can help us create transparency in the organization. And so, the recommendation that we make is always start with why. Why do you want to do OKRs? I mean, if you just like I'm a person who likes hammers, and so, I want to hammer nails. Like OKRs can be a hammer. They're just a tool. So what are you trying to accomplish with OKRs, and what problem are you trying to solve? When we work with clients to implement OKRs, that's always the first question. And then we set an OKR for the OKR implementation. So when we're doing OKRs well, right, what are we doing differently? Right? And how can we observe that and measure that? And so I think that with this manager doesn't see any particular need for the tool. Okay. What are the opportunities in that organization that make you think OKRs would be useful? Right? And can we start to get aligned on that opportunity and have conversations about that dimension of improvement, and then see, maybe it does make sense. And then I would say maybe the second piece of that, once you're aligned on why, is to start small. Start with one work group, start with one team, demonstrate the win, and build outwards. Now, you're going to need leadership support because you're changing a bunch of things about the way you work and the way you assign work. So starting small means starting with a small group, but you need to have that leadership support wherever you are. What do you think, Jeff? Did I leave something out there?
No, I was going to add the start small part. Like I think a lot of organizations, change is scary. This is big change, and we have to change everybody all at once. The answer is no. Start small, like Josh said. Build the evidence that this works, and then use that evidence to justify asking for more. Right. So let's go from one small team to 3 small teams to 5 to 10 to 15 and so forth. So I think that was good. I'm going to pull another one out of the Q&A module, and then there's one in the chat I want to talk about as well. There's a lot more in the Q&A module, so we got plenty. Is it a must to have arbitrary time boxes with OKRs? I think that's a really interesting question. I feel like you need some kind of a date in there, right? To give the team, to give the organization, to give your stakeholders, whoever's paying attention to your work, a sense of when they should expect for you to have achieved this particular goal. I think it does make sense, and it does add that sense of urgency. I agree with you that it's arbitrary, right? Deadlines are often arbitrary, and they're often just kind of forced dates for the sake of getting folks to hurry up. I would still say this. I would put it in there, but here's the thing, right? And Josh talked about the various time frames, right? Sort of annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly. If we get to that date, that arbitrary date, and we have a meeting that says, okay, how are we doing with our OKRs? If anybody is surprised by what's being discussed at that meetings, we screwed up somehow along the way. Right. So let's say we set a goal to increase the number of pre-sales of flying cars by 35% by the end of next year. Okay, great. If we get to the end of next year and I'm the head of the pre-sales department, and I come to the boss and I say, listen, we've only increased pre-sales by 3%, and everyone is shocked at that, I screwed up. Right? The date is there for us to determine whether it still makes sense to move forward with the goal, and whether or not this is the right thing and it's the right goal and the right metric. But along the way, we're going to learn stuff. And if we learn stuff that says that 35% goal is ridiculous, we're never going to hit it, the most we can hope for is 5%, right? Then we will have adjusted the goal, or we will have adjusted the date by then, right? And so I think that the date is important. for us to pause and reflect whether or not we need to continue doing this work and going in this direction. But when we hit that date, there shouldn't be any surprises at all. And we may have amended the date by then as well. Josh? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we've got a bunch of other questions, so I'm not going to pile on that one.
Okay. All righty. Let's see what else is in here with upvotes. This is a good one too. We get this one a lot. Mark asks, I work for a large retail organization in the UK as a design manager. The company uses OKRs, but are still output driven. How can I influence leadership to move more to outcomes over output? There's a question, right? The question, this comes up a lot. And I think that, I think if you have output in your key results, the reality is you've just rebranded your goal setting framework but you haven't changed anything, right? Because you're still like, I'm going to deliver this thing by this date. Nothing's really changed. I think that if the key results still look like deliverables or output, I think the question back to the organization is, when we deliver this, boss, right? When we ship this product that you've asked us to, what will our customers be doing differently? So at the outset, you're not challenging and saying, no, we're not going to do this. But you're saying, we're going to do it. We're going to do a great job. How will we know we've done a great job? What will people be doing differently? Just to start having that conversation. And then maybe at the end of the quarter, you can reflect back and say, look, boss, we shipped it on time, on budget, did a nice job with the design and the development of it. And the thing that we said that people were going to do didn't happen. Okay, what should we do next quarter? Right. So we're starting to build that conversation away from output and just introducing the concept of outcomes into it. And hopefully that we start to see some flexibility in setting those outcome-based goals. That's one minor way, one small way to move that forward. Josh, do you have another one?
I mean, I think that I don't know. I'm in violent agreement on that one. You know, here's the thing with outcomes over output is that until you've experienced that failure for yourself, in other words, you've worked long and hard to build a thing that you were excited about, and then you've seen it fail to meet the goal that you had. It's hard to get behind the difference. And so I think making it concrete and running that conversation in advance, like, okay, we're going to build this thing, right? But what will people be doing differently? And then you know, really trying to hold the organization accountable to that in parallel with the existing OKR. I think that's a promising approach.
Cool. There's at least two more I want to get to in the time that we have left. I'm going to pull one out of the chat from Stephen because I think it's an interesting conversation, and I think it comes up a lot. I think this is another situation that comes up a lot. Stephen says he's going through planning right now for next year, and they had a marketing 2025 workshop where the central project team were pushing the marketing team to talk about how their goals and projects for the year would boost net sales. Clearly, they've not understood OKRs, but how would you handle this conversation when the activity in marketing and net sales are arguably too far apart to be a meaningful leap for it to be a tangible measurement of success? This is classic, right? This is kind of like everyone has a revenue goal all of a sudden, right? That's the kind of, and I've seen that in organizations all the time. Why does every team need a specific goal? The goal is revenue, right? And you're like, but I work on authentication, or, you know, I build the APIs. How can I have a revenue goal? Right? We don't sell the APIs, right? I think the answer, I'm gonna draw on some design skills here, and I think the answer, at least an answer, not the, but an answer to this question is customer journey mapping. I think that is a nice exercise to visualize all the steps between marketing campaign and net sales. It's not like launch, ad, make money. Right? It's like launch ad, customer reacts, considers, leaves, comes back, clicks ad again, right? All of those various steps. I think one tool that you can actually use here is customer journey mapping to visualize all of the various things that need to happen between marketing campaign and sales, and then have the marketing team commit to saying, look, our campaigns can only influence some subset of the steps between marketing and sales, right? So we're going to commit to that early subset, but anything beyond that is outside of our control. I think that's how you start to have that conversation. That's one way to do it. Josh, do you agree? Disagree?
Sorry, I'm answering questions in the QA module, so I trusted you to handle that one.
Rest assured, Josh, I nailed the answer to that question.
I'm sure you did. Nicely done.
Thank you. All right, let's see. It's 5 minutes left. Let's try to get at least one more. Let's see.
Let's do the top one in the QA that Annie typed and has 3
yes, I like
upvotes.
I like this one a lot. Yes. How do you have an OKR for reducing complexity or technical debt so the resource can be freed up and cost savings can be made that is also customer user based?
So one way to hack this, the book, we almost called this book instead of who does what by how much, we almost called this book Everyone Has a Customer. And the idea is that when we look at that question, who does what by how much, right? That who is the customer. But it's not just the end customer out there who signs a contract or puts a $5 bill on the counter. The who is your customer internally. So if we're thinking about internal infrastructure work, right? Who's the customer of that infrastructure work? And how are we helping that person do their job better? And so can we measure progress on infrastructure work in terms of enabling people who work in the company to do their job more efficiently, with higher quality, with things like that? And so what you want, I think you want to do is you want to move away from, well, we're going to replace system X with system Y. And you want to move towards, we're going to spend fewer times bug tracking, fewer times bug fixing. There's less time doing this, technical activity that doesn't add value. We're going to spend less time on this. We're going to, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be how I would, that's my rapid fire answer to your question, Annie, which is to look at the people inside the organization and understand what they're trying to do, and then express the goals in terms of the result that this systems or infrastructure work will have on those people.
And this is also an answer to Paul's question. So Paul's got a question: have you ever played with OKRs for product ops? What Josh just said is the same answer for this. The short answer is yes. How does improving the operations of the product team impact the customers of that, which are going to be your product managers? What will your product managers be doing differently if product ops is working well? Same answer there as well. All right, folks, we are nearly out of time. And so with that, I wanted to first of all say thank you so much for joining us, number one. Number two, we'll send you a thank you email with a few more details in there. And it's going to be a special offer in there as well. Hopefully be able to take advantage of that. Join us on October 8th. For the next webinar. If you scan that QR code or hit that bit.ly link right there, the blue one on the left near my face there, you'll go to the registration page for the next one. That's going to be Winning at AI with OKRs. If you haven't picked up our book, please do. And please let us know what you think. If you have picked up our book, would you please write a review on Amazon for it? That would be amazing. We love those. And then finally, any questions that you didn't get answered today, Josh's email address, my email address are on the screen. Please email us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get your questions. We'd love to answer your questions. So please don't hesitate to do that, as well, as we always want to know that we're adding value. So thanks again, folks, for joining us. A pleasure to see you all. We'll see you on October 8th. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk soon. Thanks very much. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.